have a very basic workers payroll. Here we have the name. Here we're going to have the names of the workers, the basic salary of the workers, the transport allowance, the basic salary. I've entered some data here, some figures to show the different basic salaries for each of the workers. So now we are going to have to now calculate the transport allowance. We'll be using the percentage to do that. I just showed you how to get the percentage of any data, any figure or value. So we will use that method now, that function, to calculate the percentage for the transport allowance, the housing allowance. Here we have the overtime pay per hour, overtime hours, then overtime payments. The overtime pay per hour is going to be a particular amount that the company has accepted to pay per hour for overtime, and then overtime hours, the number of hours that each of the workers worked overtime in the particular month. Then this would be the multiplication of the hours, overtime hours worked, and the pay per hour. So the multiplication will give us the overtime payment. We're going to add all this together. It's very simple and interesting if you stay along. Then we're going to get the gross payment, which will be the addition of the basic salary plus the transport allowance, housing allowance, and the overtime payment. Give us the gross salary. When we make gross salary, everything put together before you now subtract things like the pension, loan repayment, if a worker has a loan repayment to do, then the tax, the monthly tax, and that is what will now lead us to the net payment. The net payment is what each worker will take home. So we're going to start. For the transport allowance, we want the transport allowance to be 12% of the basic salary. 12% of the basic salary. So we're going to create the functions and formula for the first worker, and then we'll drag the formulas across to automatically give us the result for the other workers. We don't need to do what we're going to do now for all the workers one after the other. No. So we start with the first 12% is what we want to look at now. We don't know what is a 12% amount, but let's create it. The transport allowance is 12% of the basic salary. So simply we put equal to basic salary, we'll click on it, times how many percent? 12%. Okay, enter. So 12% of the basic salary for the first worker is 240 cedis. So now the housing allowance is 13%. Okay, again, equal to basic salary times how many percent? 13%. Good. So 13%, which is the housing allowance, the house allowance for the monthly house allowance for the first worker is 260. So this company, they pay you per hour if you work overtime. Per hour payment is 10 cedis. 10 cedis. Per hour payment is 10 cedis if you work overtime. So if you work 3 hours, that will give you 30 cedis. So in a month, this particular worker, or the overtime hours worked by this particular worker, amounted to, let's say, 22. Okay, So the overtime payment for this worker consequently will be the multiplication of the overtime pay per hour times the total overtime hours, and that's definitely going to be 10 cedis times 22. So how do we do that? As simple. We come to this place, equal to, you click on this, then multiply by this, enter. So that will amount to 222 cedis. So now gross salary. What is the gross salary for this first worker? It's as simple as we're going to say basic salary plus transport allowance plus housing allowance, and then plus the payment, the total payment, overtime payment for that month. That will give us the gross salary. So to do that, again, we'll do equal to basic salary plus transport allowance plus housing allowance plus overtime payment, total overtime payment, then equal to. So the gross salary for the first worker is the sum of 2,720 cedis. So this is the amount, the gross salary for the first worker. Now the pension, the monthly pension is 5%. 5% every month is the monthly pension for each of the workers. So we're now going to 5% of the basic salary. So what do we do? Again, equal to basic salary times 5% equal to. Okay, so for this person, the pension for this particular month is 100 cedis. Let's say this person has a loan repayment. We are not going to use percentage to determine that. Maybe this person has collected some payment, some loans, and every month decided to pay back 200 cedis. So it's not all the workers that will have loan repayment in every month. So, but for this person, he has 200 cedis to pay as a loan repayment. We kept that there. And the tax is 3% of the basic salary. Again, equal to basic salary times 3% equal to. So the tax, the monthly tax for this particular worker is 60 cedis. So what's the net payment? The net payment therefore will be gross salary minus pension minus loan repayment minus tax, monthly tax. So now we're going to use the subtraction. Okay, equal to gross salary minus pension minus loan repayment minus tax equal to. So the total net pay, the take home for this particular worker will be 2,360 cedis. 2,360 cedis. Okay, so we can drag across to get the results for each of the other workers. But don't forget, the overtime hours for each of the workers will not be the same. So we are going to manually impute the overtime hours for each of the workers. Some workers probably did not do any overtime or leave it blank. Let's say the next worker did 18 hours of overtime. The other worker did not do any. The next worker did just 9 hours of overtime, while the other one did 30 hours of overtime in that month. The next worker did 18 hours of overtime. The other worker did 27 hours of overtime. The other one did not do any work, any hour. We can either put the 0 or leave it blank. Another worker did 14 hours. The other worker did 16 hours. Another did 20 hours. The next worker did not do any overtime. The other worker did 10 hours. Another worker did 22 hours. So we have the overtime hours done by each of the workers now. Then another thing we will need to, for the pension, is a percentage value, 5% of each of the workers' basic salary is the pension every month, and the tax is 3%. But for the loan repayment, some workers don't have any loan repayments to do. So let's say for this next worker, there's no loan repayments to do. For the other one, the loan repayment is 150 cedis. The next has 300 cedis to repay. The following has a very huge amount of loan to repay, 500 cedis. Okay, the next one, just 100 cedis for that month. The next one, no. The next other worker has a 150 loan repayment. The next one has 250. Then other one has 300 cedis. Another one, no loan repayment. The other one has just 80 cedis to do. The loan repayment is 180 cedis. The last worker, let's say 200 cedis. This is all we need. This is all we need. Sorry if the figures are getting close to where my head is, but okay. Now, what we will do at this point is simply to, okay, let me scroll it up a bit. Okay, what we need now to do to just get the remaining figures for the other stuff is to click and let, when your arrow is a kind of a bigger cross like this, the formula will not apply. When you put it at the bottom right, and your cursor will change to this type of cross, you click then and drag. You see that you get the total transport allowance for each of the worker. You click on the housing allowance because the percentage is already there. So when you drag it across, you see the housing allowance for each of the worker, because their basic salaries are different. That's why you have the different figure. Then the amount per hour, this one is the same for every worker. You work overtime per hour, 1 hour is 10 cedis. So here, okay, this is the overtime hours they worked. Then the overtime payment, when you drag across, because the formula is going to apply the multiplication of the overtime pay per hour and the number of hours each of the workers worked. So when we drag it across, we get this figure, these figures. Okay, then the gross salary, you do the same thing. You drag across, the gross salaries for each of the workers will show. The pension for each of the workers, you drag it across as well. The pension will show because their salaries are different. So the pension, the percentage applied to each of the salaries will also bring different results. The tax, the same thing will happen when we drag across. Okay, so now we come to the net pay for each of the workers. We drag across as well, and then we get the net pay. This is what each of the workers will take home. How did we get this? By simply using basic functions. like the multiplication, addition, subtraction, division, and the percentage function. So this is how you apply basic functions to carry out a particular task.